you miss us live, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast.
This is Ian Nethercott from the famous AutoHub show, and we're in season 5. If you're not familiar with this show, this is a new show where we do one-on-one interviews, not to be confused with our famous ambush interviews that we do at live events. And if you weren't at AutoCom, you could check out those. I got about 20 in the can I'm working on. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're actually talking about another powerful woman in the car business. We love women in the car business because they tend to be very resilient, but also to survive in the car business as a woman, I think, is difficult, and they tend to be trailblazers. So I'd love to interview them for a lot of reasons. So tell me the story. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Robyn here is going to share a little bit about her backstory. So go ahead, Robyn, and introduce yourself first for those who don't already know you.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you, Ian. Thanks for having me here today. Thanks for taking the time. And
no worries.
Everyone finds the story interesting, but it's always fun to talk cars with car people, and hopefully, yeah. But my story is interesting, probably not too different than everybody else, but it was the demo vehicle that kind of drew me to the car business. I had gone down to the States on a volleyball scholarship, and I played volleyball and studied biology and chemistry, and had big plans there to go to dental school. And ended up back in Winnipeg. The volleyball national team was out of Winnipeg, and I was going through some tryouts with them. And I was kind of at passing that if I stayed in Winnipeg, I needed a job, and if I needed a job, I needed a car, or I could go back and play pro in Europe for a little bit. And when it came down to it, I decided to hang up my volleyball shoes and pursue a different career. And that was mostly because I needed a car. So I went to school in the States, and all my credit was built up there. And my family didn't have the ability to kind of buy me something, so I had to figure out a way to do it. And I kind of decided to fake it till I make it. And anyway, I said, hey, I can sell cars. Somebody said, if you sell cars, they'll give you a car to drive. And the demo was what got me in.
Fantastic. So actually, I have a buddy who sells, I think he sells Mercedes now in Toronto, but years ago, he worked at I think it was a Mazda store. And why he quit was they wouldn't give him a Mazda Miata as a demo. They refused. So I was kind of laughing. I'm like, really? Like, you left over a Mazda Miata, dude? How low your bar was set? This is kind of funny.
I thought you were going to say they offered him a Mercedes. Like, we've drawn a couple people on, like, the demo upgrade, depending on the brand they're at, how bad we want them. But, it's a demo. It's a car. It's the ability to get in, drive your product, love your product, and go with it. But I soon realized that it's not all about the cars. It's about the people. So the cars drew me in, but it's definitely the people that's kind of kept me here.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, when I look at the car business, and it's kind of funny, when I got into the car business, and even though I had a family history, my older brother said, oh, that's a bad idea. You shouldn't do that. People have bad perceived views of people in the car business. So I was kind of laughing about it a little bit. But at the end of the day, the thing that was funny when I got in the car business is I happened to be a Honda driver at the time. I learned on one, so I knew a lot about the brand. And I just figured it'd be easy for me to get a job because, like, I knew the brand. Like, I knew the product. There was no problem. I've been in sales before. It's not a big deal. But the gentleman who ended up hiring me said, oh, no, you got to go think about it. Come back in a week and talk to me. Like, this business is not for you. So I thought that was kind of funny. But when you've been not only in the car business, which we all know under, I think, politicians and lawyers is probably one of the least trusted professions on earth. What were your friends saying to you? I mean, what did you hear from the voices that are in your life about the car business?
Well, interesting you say that. Like, actually, in the interview, I for the sales role, and again, I had no intent of staying. So in my mind, I was just trying to wow them, so I could get the car and maybe make money for a few months, and I had no intent of staying. But the general sales manager who was interviewing me, she kind of said, like, hey, like, this is a life position, and, like, we rank low. Like, used car salespeople are ranked low. Like, how do you perceive that? And my response is still what it is today. It's not, my hope is to, like, change that. And that's what I, even lead today, that if you just treat everyone like friends and family, you realize real fast that it's not just about focusing on the sale. It's just about treating people well and being upfront and trying to make their experience better and, like, go against the stereotype of what that is. And the stereotype won't exist if you play into it. So I really pride myself on being like overly upfront or overly honest and full disclosure. And that's even with the team here, you know, share the challenges, share what you're vulnerable at. And I think that's kind of what keeps you going. But same thing like you, I had friends to be like, what are you doing? I had one guy say, whatever it is, you can sell cars, but just don't go in the finance office. Like that's where things get bad. Like don't go in the finance office. And like I was like, hey, he still to this day can't believe I'm here. But I stayed with it, and you realize that you can be reputable, you can be honest, you can do this, you can still make money, you make people happy, you make customers happy, you build those relationships, and it's just like going against the stereotypes for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the way I looked at it, and maybe I was a little bit crazier that because it was a long time ago now, 25 years ish. But I looked at it as I've always do when I look at sales roles in my life, is the bar was set pretty freaking low. Like I figured I could definitely do better than that average person in the car business. Like I took a look around when I went to look at this job, and I'm like, yeah, I got better education. I've got probably better experience. I've sold stuff before. I mean, it's a car. How hard can it be, right? Like it can't be that hard. So that was kind of the way I looked at it. But to your point, what I then did is became a student of the industry. So at the store I worked at, it was all an up system. So it was shift work. And basically the manager said, hey, if you work all day, you can take ups all day. So I just worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Oh, no, at that time I think it was 6 days. Anyway, 6 days a week. And I learned the business quickly because I just talked to a lot of people. And believe it or not, even though it was 25 years ago, there was no CRM at the store I worked for. Everything was on paper. So it was kind of funny because I went to Staples and got a binder that was like yay big. It was like the biggest one they could do. And then what I did is I developed these pieces of paper with a bunch of information on it. And I would just, every day, I would just go through the people I didn't sell. And I would call them because I was good at that. I sold life insurance way back. So I got really good at talking to people. But the funny thing about it was most of the people I worked with would wait. And I'm like, like, why are you here all day to wait? Like, what's the reason for that? And they were like, well, you know, it's ups. And I'm like, yeah, but how can you sit there all day and look at a door? Like, how can you do that? I don't get it. So that was kind of the aha moment for me, was just drive your own traffic. And that always served me well. So when you look at the business today, and I'm fast forwarding, say, 25 years after I managed the internet department and other things, when you look at the business today, even 15 years ago, I was seeing that shift from, say, those 3 to 5 dealer visits, which were average 20 years ago, to 1, maybe 1 and a bit, depending on how badly that person gets pissed off the first time. But, you know, what do you see as the biggest challenges or the biggest opportunities moving forward for people entering the car business or people running stores in 2024?
Yeah, really, I don't think it's changed that much. You just got to put the work in. You got to go find the customers. You have to make it make sense. You got to listen to what people are looking for. We just came off a really great month. Our last month was our highest retail volume the store's ever done. So that's a win. I try not to pay attention to what's going on in the market, meaning like I preach, but I put my blinders on and I focus on the things that I have control over here.
Yeah.
And our top salesperson had a personal best. They delivered 30 cars, which is huge. I think the personal best before that was probably around 24, 25. So to deliver was a big deal. And when you ask him what was so different, he really said, like, I just came to work and worked. I didn't pay attention to all the noise around me, and I dug in deep, and I looked at the customers' files and said, hey, does this make sense for somebody to move from this vehicle to this vehicle? And I called them forward. He just put the work in to dig deep and find it. He didn't sit there, wait for somebody to walk in or wait for them to call. He convinced people that it was time to buy a car. And that is the epitome of sales, to make it make sense that the time is now. And then when you do that, you really believe that it is the time. Like, whatever product you're selling, whether it's cars or like my dad sold wallpaper and carpets, like I come by that very naturally. But you really believe that that is the best decision for them at the time. And when you can explain that based on the knowledge that they've already given you, either a change in their family or a change in the job or technology, or maybe they thought they only needed 1 car for their family, but now they're back to needing 2. You kind of get that information and you make it make sense for the customer. And they're happy as can be because they're not being sold. It legitimately makes sense for them. But you've got to put that effort in to understand and solve a problem in order to make the sale. You got to solve the problem. Like that is what sales is through and through.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the thing that always used to, I guess, surprise me, and I always used to sell cars based on product first, customer,
Yeah.
and then based on a payment option, not a discount, but a payment option. So my manager, when I sold cars before I became a manager myself, I used to drive him crazy because I would just lay out a bunch of options in front of a customer, kind of like a deck of cards. Like, okay, you can lease it for this, you can finance it for this, you can finance it longer for this, you can put this much down, you can put that much down. And basically what would happen is the customer, much like you would in a finance office with a menu today, would basically select an option. That's not to say they wouldn't beat me up a little bit. I'm sure they would. But at the end of the day, really it's about solving that problem. And I always use the example of a pastor. I think he was from maybe Ukrainian church. I don't know. Anyway, some former church, some Eastern European. And he came in and he was very tight on his budget. He's like, listen, I need a payment of this. I'm like, okay, you can lease. And then he's like, well, I'm not flexible and this and that. So we eventually got down and worked out a very skinny deal on a Honda Civic 4-door manual transmission. And it was like, the cheapest possible car at the time we could sell and at the lowest possible price. And we got the payment to work for the guy. And then he came back to see me the next year. And he goes, I've been praying about this. I need an automatic transmission. And I said, okay, well, you realize automatics are more money.
Yep.
He goes, yeah, well, driving the manual. I said, yeah, but like the math is not magic, dude. Like it's more money. He's like, I've been praying about it, and it'll bring you some more customers. And then we fought about it again for a couple hours, and we eventually got it done. But the thing that was funny was I remember many deals like that where basically most of the guys I worked with, including management at the time, would give up. They'd be like, yeah, this, and there was one. I think it was an unrealistic one. It took me almost a year to put the deal together. But basically, it was a question of getting the incentives and the customer expectation to line up so that way the payments worked. And it was kind of interesting when you fast forward today and you're looking at rates of, call it 9-10% retail, when we were working at rates of 1 or 2%. And still it was painful for people. And cars today are even more expensive than they were then. I mean, my niece is looking for a minivan. And I think a Toyota Sienna is about almost $60,000 today. And I'm like, I remember when Dodge Caravans were 18 grand. Like, it wasn't that long ago. Like, they weren't a great car, but man, they were cheap. Like, you could get that cheap. You want a van, that's the vehicle. So it was kind of funny. So when you look at, I guess, leasing, which would be something close to my heart because I was a lease manager, and I look at people like Brian Benstock on leasing with like 75%, retention number. And obviously you're working with higher dollar value cars than ever. Even Chrysler products, I think, are being leased today, which is kind of interesting. What do you see on the lease front, being that you work with a lot of Highline customers? What do you see there?
Yeah, like leasing is just such a wonderful option that I think has got such a bad reputation from years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, my parents leased the car and they hit a tree and wrote it off and they still had to pay on it for 5 years. Like the preconceived notions about leasing from years ago was just awful, and for some reason it's still there. But actually, I had an EV customer the other day, and this was a perfect example. Traditional cash paying customer, he purchased an EV vehicle, and a couple of things, he needed to get out of it. And he'd only owned it for about 18 months. And there was a substantial difference between what he paid for it to what that vehicle's worth today. Yeah. And I kind of said, like, hey, I really wish you would have leased it because I think it would have helped. And he goes, oh no, your salesperson had said that to me when I was sitting down to buy it. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. I'm thankful that we presented that. But the power of lease in that scenario would have financially helped him out of that lease much easier than the hit that he would take between what it was worth today to what it was worth 18 months ago. And that's a tough one. So lease one for EV is going to come back here. But he said, oh no, I always pay cash. And I said, why? Like in this example, let the manufacturer kind of take on the risk of that vehicle. And we've seen it time and time again, even if it's a collision or someone's, gotten into a major accident, and vehicles are technologically more advanced than they've ever been. Yep. So you're paying so much for the repair of the vehicle, and it's not just body work, it's computer systems that we're replacing. Yeah. And then the depreciation that vehicle is going to take, should you ever decide to change your mind on it. Leasing just adds such a awesome opportunity to say, hey, I'm not going to take this depreciation should I change my mind. So I am a big supporter of lease. One, it's obviously good for the dealership to have that customer coming back in 2 or 3 years from now, but it really does protect the customer. I give the option to the, you know, the sales team. We talk about it and train on it, that it should be presented. And like you said, it's one more option. So you're picking A, B, or C. You're going to buy the car because I built value in it. I showed you why it was so cool. I listened to what you needed. But leasing needs to continue to be an option, regardless. High end, you're talking, you know, Chrysler, you're talking whatever the product is here, leasing needs to be an option that's being presented. And customers need to kind of open their eyes and say, hey, it's cool that you got the money in the bank to pay for it cash, but you might not want to do that in every scenario.
Yeah, I'll have to provide a lease sheet that I used to use when I sold cars. It's great printing. It's a lease sheet I developed. It's a pros and cons of leasing. And I had it printed, but I always did it handwritten on a piece of paper because that way I could customize it to the customer. But it's lethal because it really goes through the pros and cons, and it's not about one being better than the other. It's like here's the thoughts. And the thing that was interesting when I did that was I'd get people going, how come no one told me about that before? Which was kind of interesting. But when you look at leasing and you look at financing cars and you also look at what was interesting to me when I worked for Nissan is I did a lot of work with dealers in Saskatchewan. And dealers in Saskatchewan, if you're not familiar, it's kind of like North Dakota. There's a lot of farmers. There's a lot of Hutterites, I believe, in that area. They tended to buy cars cash every couple of years and then be aggravated a couple of years later when they brought them back and the dealer, you know, they would depreciate. So I remember saying to some dealers at the time, and I'm not sure if Nissan still offers this, but they offered at the time a prepaid lease. So I said, forget the finance, forget the cash, forget a traditional lease. Just have this conversation with the farmer. Listen, you got a bunch of money right now. And we've done this before. 3 years ago, you came back and you were pissed off at me because you bought this car and that wasn't worth it. So why don't you do this? You just give me one check. We'll pay half the car. We'll pay it right now. You'll own that half. 3 years, come back to see me. We'll get you another car. You'll pay again half. Where I'm saving you 50%. And it was a huge hit for them because the customer got it. They were like, well, why am I doing 100% of something when I'm going to trade it in 3 years and then I'm going to be angry? It makes sense. And that's really, I think, what it comes down to, especially when you look at EVs are a great example, with the exception, I think, what Tesla did, which we'll see how that goes for them. But, you know, everyone thinks about what General Motors did in the 2005 area. But, you know, at the end of the day, leasing is a great way to own something, depending on what you use the car for. And especially when you look at higher end vehicles, as the price of the vehicle is up, the lease penetration tends to be higher. I believe with Honda, when I worked for Honda, we were at about a 40% lease percentage in the market I lived in. But the market the gentleman that always amazed me was Ben Stock, because he's not only the top Honda dealer in the US market, I think in the world. His lease retention number was 78%. And to your point earlier, what he would basically do is say, listen, bring your car back. I'll put you in a new car for this much a day. He says, I don't even need to look at the car. I don't even care. Bring it back. We'll switch. We'll swap it. And he made it very simple for customers. And I initially didn't believe him. I'm like, really, that's a high number, dude. Like, how are you doing that? So, I mean, again, it's the tenacity to want to get it done, but also the action to get it done in a very simplified way. But when you look at sort of, I guess, attracting talent and specifically retaining talent, I know we've done probably 15 shows on human resources, and we did one at the beginning of this week. I was a little rough around the edges because I didn't have a lot of sleep. But anyway, you know, retaining talent in automotive is challenging, but also we've heard a lot of talk from a lot of our guests about attracting and retaining female talent. I mean, what's your thought there, being a woman in auto? You know, what's your thought there? Like, how do you get that done?
Yeah. Yeah, so attracting and retaining talent is tough in automotive. I get it.
Yeah.
For sure. It's interesting. Just to touch on the lease thing, and then we'll get to the female side of it.
Yeah.
But we have a brand specialist right now who does a great job presenting that one-time lease payment.
Yep.
And customers that do it love it. And it's a great option. But when you have somebody new who's just entered and they're trying to learn the specifics of all the vehicles product knowledge, and then sales process on top of it, and just understanding what a lease is and how to present it. And then you're gonna complicate it even more by explaining a one-time lease payment. Like it almost takes, you have to have that senior professional salesperson to be able to present the options that's going to best suit the customer. And when you listen to what the customer needs and you present the options, like you or I could listen to a customer and talk and say, hey, well, you should probably consider leasing. Now, if you're a real estate agent and they drive, 30,000 kilometers a year, leasing's probably not the best option for them. So we can go over that. But to be able to assess what the person's going to use, how they're going to use it, there's so much of that goes into the value into a person that's been there and experienced that to present the option that's going to best suit them, sets that salesperson apart from the rest.
Right.
So the longer we are able to retain them, man, it just adds another level of customer service, which isn't always appreciated or valued, regardless of brand, The longer someone's been there, they've been through the different scenarios, they can present that. But attracting females specifically, you know what? I kind of get this question a lot, and in the way that, to me, I don't see myself any different than anyone else. I think it's pretty unique that I'm a female, dealer principal here, and it's awesome, it's cool, but you can't say no to results. So if you just go ahead and you put those blinders back on and you focus on what you need to do, and I'm able to produce the same results or better because I'm competitive as hell and I want to be better than everybody else, like it shouldn't really make a difference. Now, the difference that I've seen consistently recruiting salespeople, regardless of gender, is the confidence. You most likely could have two people with similar backgrounds, let's say no previous sales experience, and most often enough, it would be the female who says, hey, I don't know if this is going to work, and I don't think I'm cut out for this, and the self-doubt is communicated versus a similar male with a similar background and the male will sell it. Oh, yeah, I got this, no problem. The confidence difference at that intermediate stage is very evident. And the male will typically fake it till he makes it, and the female will acknowledge the insecurities that they might have.
Right.
So when I'm coaching or mentoring or I see that, it's the same thing like applying for a promotion. You probably don't have the skills, whether you're female or male. You're not doing everything that promotion might be, but you have the ability to learn what that job's going to do, and you're going to kill it. You're going to be okay. But you can't go in sharing those insecurities with your prospective manager. You got to be able to say, I don't know that, but I'm going to figure it out, rather than share like, hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this. And if anything, if I could encourage more people to be really, I guess, reflective on, is this just their own insecurity and does it need to be verbalized at that time? Because I think that adds doubt to the person who's hiring you across the table, rather than just saying, hey, I'm going to figure this out regardless of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that 100%. I mean, when you look at compensation, for example, is another topic we've talked about a lot, but also when you look at generations, if you're managing, say, 4 generations in a store, from the baby boomers on down to your Gen Z or Generation Alpha, which I think is coming next, I mean, at the end of the day, there's always a mixed bag in all generations, but I think part of the biggest challenge dealers face, and even car industry professionals, I actually read an article today on recruiting techs from the Philippines, which I thought was kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, it's really about changing the channel on the industry. I think a lot of it is like, car business, but then when people work in it for a while, like, yeah, it isn't that bad. But also, I think it appeals, at least for me, it appealed to the variety in a day. It wasn't, the days were not the same. So I think that it definitely takes a special kind of person with that forward-thinking viewpoint. I mean, one of my biggest misconceptions when I started in the car business was perfection was possible. And I quickly realized that was not going to happen. So you got very good at, making perfection seem to be reality when it wasn't, for example. I mean, I used the example of, what was it? So I bought this Jeep Grand Cherokee recently, and the guys at Stellantis were trying to sell me their monthly recurring revenue model and their app for the car. So the car told me I got to buy something. I should buy it. I should just give my credit card. I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm buying. So then I got a call from them, and they're like, hey, you should buy this. I'm like, well, please explain to me what it is I should give you money for. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the car's telling me I got to give it money, which is fine. It's not an ATM machine, but whatever. You're calling me telling me I got to give you money. I'm not against giving you money, but what is it I'm giving you money for? Like, please explain. And then I called my buddy who actually owns the dealership I bought it from, and I said, like, you realize, like, Stellantis is calling customers with no clear message about they should get money for some reason. It's just, what's that about? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, it was just kind of interesting. So when you're looking at it from a point of view of staffing, I think the best way to look at it is you need someone who has multifaceted talent and is a quick learner. Because I think if anything today, when you look at the complexity of communication today and the ability to have to adapt to different generations, that's a key skill. But more importantly, people skills. Like, I was at this hotel restaurant when I was in Baltimore, and the waitress, we were having lunch, me and my wife, and the waitress was talking about how her feet hurt all the time. And I said, well, you should go work in the car business. She goes, why is that? I'm like, well, yeah, my feet hurt a little bit, but I was on my feet all the time. But it was much more interesting than just going, did you want fries with that? Like, it's much more dynamic than that, and you probably end up making more money. So it was kind of interesting, just because she was so frustrated with the amount of effort to make a small return. And I think that's the misconception in the car business. People think, oh, you can't make any money in the car business.
Man, that's absolutely a misconception. And, like, have you ever been a waiter, Ian?
No.
Have you ever waited tables?
Well, I worked at a hospital kitchen as a high school student.
Okay.
Which was not fun. Yeah, no thanks.
It is a tough job. Like, it is freaking tough. I had a couple different stints as a waitress. One was Italian restaurants, and it was all through university cool, and the other one was a breakfast spot, man. Breakfast spot, it's all on turns, and it is stale. Like, you're talking about how fast we turn our used car inventory. Like, you're talking about how fast you turn tables.
Yeah.
Like, each tabletop is more, and then the upgrades, Yeah. And those skills, someone may say, hey, this doesn't work so well, but it absolutely applies to sales in general. Or even McDonald's. McDonald's, like, I'm sure you've heard the training that typical.
They know what they're doing. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. We had a manager come sell cars for us from McDonald's. He was a manager there at McDonald's, but he had gone through, like, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. He had, like, lean training. We talked about Six Sigma, like, talk about efficiency. This is half full, so it's got to go. They got the next one ready. And, like, the amount of training that we can get from some of these retailers that is sometimes frowned upon. Like, oh, I waited tables at, whatever, Applebee's for 10 years. Like, okay, you got it. You've already shown you got the people skills, the upsell skills, the table turns. Like, you understand business. We just got to take that and apply it to a different industry. But the people skills necessary in order to be successful in that environment far exceed some of the people coming in or who think that they can just kill it, a university degree or school or whatever that training is. But ultimately, this car business is a people business.
Yeah.
And talk about bartenders and waitresses, like, they got it. They just need the confidence to understand that they can have a career and get off their feet and sell bigger retail pieces and make a ton of money doing it. But how do we get that message out there? I don't know. I have given, like, spiffs, sales managers, need a salesperson, go shopping for your salesperson, go buy a new suit and go hire the suit guy, or go shop for a salesperson. I'll pay for your shopping spree when you come home, when you come back with two new salespeople. But the idea is that they're already out there. We just have to open up people's eyes to say how awesome the automotive industry really is and how much potential there is, regardless of gender or age. It's still, there's lots of potential here.
Look for the best people in your day-to-day life. Like, it's funny, I moved to a new city, Calgary. I used to live in Vancouver, and I'd been going to the same barber in Vancouver probably for 20 years. And so there's a bunch of barbers around, good and bad, whatever. I was walking by one today, so I went and got a haircut, and a guy, I think he's originally from Ukraine, I don't know, very detail-oriented barber, like ridiculously detail-oriented. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone this focused in my life. I was like, wow, this guy's got it down. Like most of these barbers, it's like, what do you want? My haircut is not complicated, but just the detail side of it. And I compare him to a TELUS rep, not to beat up TELUS, but TELUS has been telemarketing me for about 3 weeks to try and change my cell phone. And, to me, cell phones, it's all about, what am I paying a month for the service? The cell phone, I don't care. Whatever. With the 14, the 12, the 25, whatever the phone they're selling today. So I went in there, and I was walking in the mall yesterday, so I went in there, and I was like, okay, like, you guys have been harassing me for a while. Like, tell me the stick. Well, you got to buy a phone. I'm like, okay, so if I don't buy a phone, I just don't qualify. Yeah, that's the promotion. I said, okay, so there's nothing you could do for me. You can't even analyze my bill. If I'm not buying a phone, I might as well not even be here. He's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like, what kind of selling is that? Like, you got a bunch of phones in the back, you're trying to blow out? Like, what is it you're doing? Like, it was insanity. And then yeah. So then I'm like, okay, let me just think about it from a different point of view. Let me say my wife's got an older phone. If I buy her a new phone, what does that mean for me? There's 2 lines. He's like, well, I'd save you $7 a month and a friends and family discount. I'm like, okay, so I got to pay $25 a month for the phone, and you're saving me 14. Oh, but you get more data. I don't need 200 gigabytes of data. Like, what am I doing with that much data? Like, why would I ever need that much? I mean, it was lunacy. But in fairness to the salesperson, where's the logic? Like, that makes no sense. Like, I mean, I don't know. And that's, I think, part of the issue, or part of what was a benefit for me when I started the car business. Yeah, I didn't get the best training, but I got it twice a day. So I got a lot of training on different things. And I developed my own tools over time because I got real good at leasing. Like, I quickly realized that the most successful people in the store I worked at were lease managers. So I was like, okay, I don't want to be hunting for customers every single day, even though I'm good at that. If I can get them to come back, then I'm good. So, and if they're happy at the same time, even better.
Isn't that sad though? Like, if that person actually, and maybe they were trained and maybe there's other things there, but if that person really approached this, like we just said, like friends and family, like, and you went in and analyzed this, and even if he came back and said, you know what, this promotion, it doesn't even make sense for you, you'd probably have more respect for that than trying to be sold something that you just don't need. You have to make it make sense, and the only way to do that is to be the one asking questions, and you got to listen and research it. You can't, sales, everyone's like, oh, you're a great salesperson, and you're talkative, and you're outgoing, and you're like, that's not it. You know, that's piece of that. But a great salesperson's a great listener because they're listening to every word that someone's saying. Actually, no wonder, because you have a podcast show and you ask questions based on what people talk about. But it's no different. Like, you're listening to what their needs are, and you're providing a solution for their needs, right?
100%. I mean, when I sold cars, and it was funny, I used to sell a lot of hybrids way back. And the back end of the story is funny. But anyway, the front end, people come in, and all the salesmen I work with are like, oh no, hybrid. Oh shit. I don't want to talk about hybrid. You should talk to Ian. He's the expert on hybrids. And I'm like, okay. No problem. Yeah, I'll talk to the guy about a hybrid. I don't care what car he buys. He wants to buy a hybrid. That's fine. So I'd sit down, and I had a very simple brochure that I came up with. But before I even gave them that, I'd say, okay, like, what are you using the car for? Well, I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. Okay, you realize this car is $7,000 more than a gas car. They said, yeah. I said, okay, great. So does the math work for you, or you just not care? I don't care. Okay, fine. So let's just talk about a hybrid. We'll drive you in one. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, we can talk about gas cars. And about half the time, they buy a gas car because it didn't make sense. Yep. So I remember going to the same dealership years later. I hadn't worked there in years because I got out of the retail side. And I'm walking around the showroom because I used to go visit sometimes. And a customer came in and said, yeah, I want to talk to someone about a hybrid. Oh, we used to have a guy here who knew that car. He doesn't work here anymore, so good luck.
That's what it is.
I'm not kidding. It was like, and I see this with electric cars today. It's like, oh, electric? Oh, buy a gas car, dude.
You know what, though? So I had just started. I was in training with, I started at a Honda store, and I was in training, and this guy walked in, and he asked me about the S2000 and showed.
Love that car. I owned one. It was great. Yeah.
I learned about Civics. I learned about CRVs. Like, I haven't got there.
Yeah, that's fine.
One a year. So right away, I said, hey, yeah, I'm probably not the best person to help you with that. But my friend over here, who is like the car guy, like
Yeah.
in cars,
Yeah.
lives, loves, like he knows everything that there is to know. And the guy says to me, "Well, I don't really know much about cars either. I just want to drive it." I'm like, "Oh, I can help you with that." Ended up, we went on the demo drive. He was not the car guy to talk cars. He liked the car for what it looked like. He liked the car for the convertible. He liked the car for all the reasons that some people like cars. And if he would have entered in with the car guy right away, it wouldn't have been the right match. But right away, I said, "Hey, I'm not educated enough to do this for you. I'm going to turn you over." And he's like, "No, hold on. You're exactly what I need right now." And I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. You got to get by and you got to learn, but you have to have the education. That only happens on the occasion. But you definitely got to learn it first and know it. But you got to know your customer, number one.
Well, let me show you this now that you're talking about S2000. So this is a print my wife got me years ago now. I actually own one. It took me almost 20 years to buy one just because I could never find one that made sense. So she got me this print. It was a limited edition of that car. I actually owned a lease trade-in. I think it was a finance trade. Anyway, years ago. Great vehicle, but I was a fan of it when it came out, so I knew a lot about it. But I used to drive a guy I worked with crazy because I used to just take his out on test drives because I like driving the car. And I said, "Oh, I got a customer," and it was his demo, so it was fine, but it was just kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it isn't about cars; it's about people. And sometimes, rightly or wrongly, we focus too much on that. So when you look at it from a point of view of S2000, and I worked at an auto mall, so it was always funny because I'd always have people coming in and going, "I'm looking at the Miata," and then I'm looking at the S2000. They said, "Well, do you drive a manual?" They said, "No." "Okay, go buy the Miata." They said, "What do you mean?" There's no more discussion.
Yeah.
You're just not going to buy the car. Like, it's fine. Like, it's a great car. I'd love to show it to you. You don't drive the transmission. It's not available in automatic. Yeah. Oh, okay. And that was the end of the discussion. Because, like, why even bother? Like, if you're trying to compare those cars, A, you don't understand them, and B, you don't drive the transmission. So it really doesn't matter. It's like, what was it? A buddy of mine works at a dealer in Vancouver that sells high-end luxury cars, mostly Porsche. And he had a Carrera GT there as a used car. And I was there. I owned a Porsche briefly. I was there just kicking tires because I lived in the neighborhood. And there was a guy, and he's asking him all these questions about, like, traction control and ABS and all this crap. I said, "Dude, this is not the car." He said, "What do you mean?" "This is dangerous car. If you don't get it, don't buy it. Like, you probably shouldn't own it. You're probably going to get dead. It's a very sophisticated car for a very select group of people. It's expensive. And those features aren't available. Like, that's not on this car. They're not adding it. Like, it doesn't happen." So it was kind of, and that's kind of the funny thing, I think, sometimes when you don't listen to the customer or they ask questions like that, you go, "Listen, like, it sounds to me like these safety features are important to you. And you like performance. No problem. We have them available on this car. This car is an older car. It's kind of a collector piece. It's expensive. It's very fast, but it's not really designed for that daily driver that you're looking for your family that also is sporty, right? It's not really that car." Like, there's a high-end dealership here in Calgary that I went to visit. I was just curious. I drive around and look at cars sometimes. And they sell, I don't know, like Rolls Royce, Lotus, all this stuff. And I said, like, why would someone buy this new Lotus? And it's got like, I think it has like a Toyota engine in it or something. He's like, "Oh, this, that, and a bag of chips." I'm like, but like, why? Like, I'm buying basically a Toyota engine and a fancy body. Like, to me, that's not interesting. But for some people, it would be. So it really depends.
Sure. And, like, you have the confidence, and that's it. Like, when somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I'm not driving manual, or I can't drive manual, I can't drive stick," it's not like you're running to your sales manager and being like, we gotta order an S2000 going that. They don't, like,
No.
It's just saying the car for you. And that's the confidence piece that I'm talking about, to be able to guide the customer instead of order taking, right? Like, those are very different skills.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we have to, selling out of stock versus dealer trades or whatever else that you're kind of going through, but to make it make sense for that customer, and hey, this probably isn't the right car for you. Like, we got hundreds of cars here, you're going to narrow it down to a couple and present. We're going to make the decision, but you got to be able to say that's probably not the right option for you. And you got the confidence to say that. And like, once you've been through that experience, that's irreplaceable. And that's the hard part about the turnover, to go back to that in that.
So what did you find was the biggest challenge as you went from everyone's ordering a car to we got inventory and now we have to sell these cars? Like, what did you see that as a challenge from a management point of view?
Yeah, for sure. I think through that and the ordering of vehicles with basically everything you could. You were an order taker for a couple of years there, and you had to go back. And you really had to retrain everybody on what that looks like and give the power back to the customer. Because it was at a point that it was almost like entitled. That someone's like, "Oh, you want a car?" Yeah, well, we'll see about that, you know. And it's back to that customer service aspect. So for me, that's a great thing because we are here to serve the customer. Yeah, it's a bonus that you're selling cars. But we are here to serve the customer and provide a solution to whatever their problem might be. So yeah, the customer's got concerns. We actually answer them instead of saying, well, this is all you can get, so take it and leave it. It's not that. So for me, it's back to what I'm used to. I'm much happier in this. Like financially, from a dealership perspective, it was great. Like there's daily business here because low supply, high demand.
No inventory.
Low inventory, you're there, so that's great. But ultimately, to get back into the selling and try and connect people with the right vehicle for them is the benefit for sure.
Yeah, I kind of remember. I think it was 2006. Honda came out with this big Civic, and there was none. And people come in and they'd want a discount. We'd be like, "Yeah, we got the test drive one. We're not selling that. So if you want one, it's like 3 to 6 months, and if you don't want it, okay." Well, I'm going to go buy a Mazda. Okay, go buy the Mazda then. Like, I don't have one, so, good luck. And it was funny because I happened to be at the same dealer when I was in Vancouver when this was all going on. And I'd see customers walk in, talk to a sales rep who's a buddy of mine. And you go, "What's the price on this?" You could, like, print it out. Here you go. Let me know. There was no, like, let's sit down and talk about it at all. It was like, it was kind of interesting. So as you see things moving forward and you see sort of the change of, I guess, maybe ownership of cars as you look across generations, do you feel that customers are going to own cars longer moving forward, which seems to be the trend in the US? Or do you think it's just people aren't going to buy cars the same way? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, interesting. It's a good question. I think about this stuff. Like, those are the questions that honestly keep me up at night because you think about where the industry is going just from gas to electric and what that looks like.
Yep.
But when I think about it, I think it's going to be shorter term. I think we're going to really move towards electric within the next, 10 years. It's going to be substantially different than where we are. And the technology is ever changing on those cars. So I think it's shorter. I think we go more to leasing, and I think you're just swapping cars out, kind of like cell phones.
Yeah.
The shorter life of a cell phone. It's every year or two, what's next, and we're ready for the next one. So I think it is shorter. I think they're faster turns, but shorter lifetime for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed a lady. She does, I think, everything EV or EVs for everyone or something anyway. And we've done a lot of shows on EVs. I've even convinced OEMs to come on EV shows, which is hard to do. And EVs are clearly a love it or hate it fanboy topic in some cases. But I remember I was spending some time with a buddy of mine who's the sales and marketing director of Brian Jessel, BMW. And I was talking about the 3 Series and the Model 3. And I said, well, if you think they're not taking 3 Series customers with a Model 3, you're a fool. Like, you need to figure that out. But now that we have a lot of choices in the market and we're seeing inventory pile up, I'm curious as to what you see the manufacturers doing to make that possible. I know historically, whether it be BMW or others, they incentivize with a high lease end value to make that work. Do you see them saying, hey, we got to move these things, but more importantly, how can we be more competitive to make it attractive to that customer who, say, bought, what's your most popular car that you sell?
Q5.
Yeah, so like, for example, Q5 customers looking for an electric e-tron or whatever, how do we convert that customer, to an electric versus put them in a gas car?
Yeah, so this is kind of cool, but the difference between provincial, and I'm so curious what's going to happen in the States, because we're usually, 5 or 7 years behind the States, so it's really interesting when you look at what's happening here, but provincially and federally, what's happening is, you know, like Quebec is getting a mandate that X amount of vehicles need to be electric, and you know, BC is getting that, but in the prairies, like, we still don't have the infrastructure as far as charging stations go to even make that a reality. So already what's happening is we're kind of swapping within dealerships, like just within our network, like electrics they're going out to BC or Quebec or whatever that is. And I think there's going to be a very big sway between like provincial legislation across from where that's at, and the legislation that's come out provincially is intense. Like, we either, like, OEMs have got to be there, or else they're going to get left behind unless we really think this is going to change. But everything that we're said, we have to prepare for that. So yeah, I don't, basically, like, I don't know how it's going to play out, but prairies are for sure behind where the other parts of Canada are.
Yeah.
So it's gonna, years to come. We'll see what that looks like, but there's a lot more hesitancy to go EV in our climate, for sure, than there is elsewhere. And I think the charging station infrastructure is really a big piece of it. And how do you get people to invest in hundreds of thousands of dollars for charging stations, with the lifeline being, or like the usage being so low right now? Like, you put the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart, like, what's coming first? But it's ever changing, that's for sure.
Well, I saw a post this morning. It was a Tesla Cybertruck at a Ford dealer paying to use the Ford dealer Cybertruck or charging network, and he goes, "Did you try and get the car as a trade-in?" And I was like, well, I was howling. I'm like, it's like some sort of aluminum Aztec or something that the guy bought. But I mean, I would totally try him on. Why not? But it was just kind of funny, especially when I saw all the hype last week. Was it Porsche's doing a hybrid 911? Yeah. And they're not talking about it other than it's faster than the GT3. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that transition goes, especially if you have purists on both sides. But I really wanted to thank you for taking the time today. You know, it was a really interesting interview to hear more about your story. And if you're interested in that, you know, that lease thing, I definitely send it to you. But it's basically, it was built for Honda, but you can adapt it. But it's basically a printed form that I would draw by hand. And it's basically got, you know, pro and con. I think it's Ben Franklin pros and cons, but it's basically a modified version of that to have the conversation every single time, which is what I would do. So every single time I got down to payments or down to pricing, I would have the lease conversation every single time without fail. And I would always pick up 30-40% lease, because some people would just go, no, I'm not leasing. And then I would go through it and they're like, yeah, maybe I should. So the exercise was do it a lot. That was the exercise.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The power of even just writing it out by hand, again, it just shows like you're connecting with that customer and that they're personalized. It's not like a print off. Yeah. There's something to be said, you know, pen and paper. Finance office still uses that. You go over usage of vehicle and warranty and parts breaking down, but it's powerful, right? Because you're just connected with the person across the table from you.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Man, it's just awesome. It's just awesome. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for putting the time. Not easy, but it's pretty fun, and it's easy to talk cars with another car guy. So
I try.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for a great time.
No problem. Have yourself a great day.
You too. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Hey, if you missed us live, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast.